Happy Monday, good friends. We are here and we are energized and we're kicking off June. Happy Pride Month, friends. I am so excited to be here. And I know many of you might be feeling a little revived because it is summer. The warmth is out. It is a fresh new month. Maybe some of you are taking some time off for video games, for vacation, for whatever it is. But no matter where you are in your life, I also love that you decided to come join us here this Monday evening as we kick off another amazing episode of Pink Pixels. I know I say this a lot and maybe I'm a bit of a broken record, but I'm old, so deal with it. It's one of those choices that we make that we can fill our lives, our time, with so many different things. We have an endless amount of options, especially when we have our phone, right? Like these devices that can connect us to so many different communities and content and information all over. You amazing people, come and join us here. You want to be here at a space where we have discussions, where we learn about one another, where we talk about our gaming space, about what we love, what we wish we would see out of it, where we hope that it goes, right? There we get other people's perspectives and it becomes such a richer endeavor because of it. And so I want to thank you all. I see so many wonderful people in chat. I am not old. I have you fooled, right? But we're all here and it's a choice. It's a choice to choose what we bring into our lives. It's a choice to choose what we bring to help broaden our perspectives, to help us gain understanding. And that impacts our worldview of how we see people and also how we see ourselves, how we talk to ourselves, how we're mean to ourselves or kind to ourselves. And so I want to thank you all. There are a million things you can be doing, and you're here. You're choosing to be part of a space that continues to want to invest in ourselves and others. So thank you. And tonight, as promised, all right, I told you all last week that we have an amazing guest joining us. She is just a burst of energy and she plays games that I know so little about. So it's going to be a perfect balance as we dive into it. Let's go ahead and turn it straight over to Rook. Rook, come say hello to our wonderful guests, our audience.
Hello. Is there more than one of me here?
Sure.
Multiple guests? Are we going to do like a double guest situation? Two Rooks? No, it's so good to see you. And Caustic, it's so great to be here. Hi, everyone. Hello, chat. Or if you're listening after the fact, I hope you are doing well. And what an amazing intro. I am so thrilled to be here on Pink Pixels. My name is Rook, or Rookuri, as I'm known online. And I am a variety MMORPG content creator, caster. I do podcasting and I do shoutcasting. So casting in a lot of different ways. And host for various esports events relating to the MMOs that I play and love. I'm also an LGBTQIA plus content creator. Happy Pride, everybody! And I hope you are celebrating no matter what, no matter who you are, where you might be within the LGBTQIA plus family or as an ally. Let's get a lot of support and a lot of love, especially when the world is kind of a harrowing place recently. But I try as much as possible through my content and through many of the events that I cast or the podcasts that I do to bring that sort of energy and that love that we have for our games to create safe spaces online and to also get to have a lot of fun while we do it. Not afraid of the big issues or the big discussions, but spaces where we can also remember that it's okay to remember that fundamentally we love games. And that's why we play them, theoretically, for fun and stuff. So we try to bring that hype, whether I am casting community events or doing things like the World Races for World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy XIV, with their races, or a lot of other events going on in PvP. Been doing stuff for Blizzard recently, and we'll be doing some classic Cataclysm stuff coming up. So whether it's there on my own channel or on the podcast that I do, we try to keep all of that in mind and hold on to what got us into gaming in the first place. But thanks again so much for having me.
Of course. Rookuri, I'm so thrilled to have you here. I love that you mentioned this very simple but important thing of we love video games. Like this is a thing that we do, that we enjoy, and it has somehow united all of us. Where did your video game journey begin? What was it like this? This is something that I love, and I'm going to now dedicate my life and create content and podcasts and friends and community and so much around this subject matter.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I think we all find gaming in different ways, right? But some of us have been lucky enough to have games play a role in our life for almost as long as we can remember. And I was so lucky in that my dad was a really avid gamer. And even though games were like forbidden at my mom's house, when I'd go over to my dad's house where you could have fun and do cool stuff, we'd play video games. So a lot of my favorite franchises, including Final Fantasy, I found that way. Final Fantasy VIII was one of the first games I remember playing or watching my dad play and thinking, games are more than just games, you know? They are stories, they're immersive experiences. You can get just as interested or hooked on a game as you can a TV show or your favorite book, or your own imagination, you know? They bring you into a world, they connect you to others. And I was hooked on 8 as a kid. Every single time I'd go over, I was like, what's the next chapter? What's the new episode? What's the next portion of the game, you know? And it's stuck with me ever since then, that games, whether they are profound or touching experiences that we have, or they are communal experiences like in MMORPGs, or they're even bringing us together on podcasts and stuff like this, that we can have journeys that are bigger than ourselves in them, and that those journeys can leave a big mark on our lives. So I knew as I grew older, I always wanted to do something or at least stay in touch with gaming. And though I went to school for theater and voice, actually opera, wildly enough, when I graduated, the opportunity to start streaming came up. And I went, this is amazing. And it's just taken off since then.
That is wild, and also amazingly concise for all of this. You're like, yeah, we did all of this, and then suddenly we're talking about your background and what you've studied, and then here you are as a content creator. Your story. Thank you for the Cliff Notes version. But let's dive into that, because content creating is an interesting thing. And I, of course, as you mentioned, like theater, voice, opera, like obviously you have some performative roots coming in play here. Like, is there some appeal to go from like the stage performance to be like on this digital stage that you've created now?
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny to me because a lot of times you'll see online people talk about, I want to get into content creation.
Yeah.
What should I do? And more often than not, you'll see, well, this is the equipment that you need. You need to download OBS or Streamlabs OBS, or you need to get all this stuff. You need to get your software set up. You need to set a schedule. You need to pick a game, find a niche, whatever they're kind of trying to illustrate you in. But oftentimes, if people will ask me, what's some of your biggest advice about content creation, I'll include in that, have you ever taken an acting lesson? Have you done an improv course? Have you done a public speaking course? Even outside of school, there are so many classes you can sign up for. There are so many even groups that kind of share interests in those things that you can get connected with. And a lot of times people forget that that component of being on camera. Now, of course, you've got VTubers, you have a huge range of ways that you can represent yourself online. But if you're looking to be dynamic, if you're looking to be able to, foster connections and feel more confident when you're on camera or in front of a mic, that's honestly one of the things that I'm like, I have used all the stuff from my theatrical training and my stage training. I use it every day, every event, the way I prep for a broadcast event, for casting as some sort of big thing for a game, versus the way that I prep for my own stream. It makes use of a lot of the same skill sets. So I'm always recommending that people, go give it a shot and put themselves out there, because you'll take something away from it, even if it's not specifically for content creation.
That's so smart. And because you're right, when you were going through that list, I'm like, yep, that's a checklist. That's a checklist item, right? Like as we go through, and you find those almost anywhere. Like I think even Ninja had like a content creating 101 sort of class that came out, and similar things were listed. Like, what are the programs that you're using? There's a lot of technical skills, but the performative skills, and even just that art of learning how to express yourself, whether it is to a digital audience or a live, in-person audience, or even just to friends and family members, right? That takes a development and a reflection of knowing who you are and how do you want to take that externally? How do you begin to express that? It actually made me think of, what was that? Toastmasters. That's what it was. Toastmasters is one of those like outside, for those of us who have graduated and we don't have a club or an extracurricular.
Yep.
Right. Those are wonderful organizations for public speaking. But for you, what was the draw? Because you're like suggesting and I think improv classes, acting classes, what a great way to talk about like creating a character, because as we create characters, that also helps us think about how we create ourselves. But for you, right, what was the appeal? Because clearly I'm seeing some clear talent. Obviously, there's a reason why you've developed this, and it feels very natural to express yourselves. But what drew you to even want to do theater, or of course this digital theater that we have now?
Well, Caustic, big same to you. I mean, you radiate that same energy. I mean, you're talking about characters and inhabiting characters. Before we even started the podcast today, we were talking a little bit about Caustic doing TTRPG stuff, right?
Those are the secret pre-show
I'm
talks.
so
No one
sorry.
knows.
Oh, I'm
No one
so
knows.
sorry. Right. Okay. Well, we spoke about nothing, and absolutely nothing occurred before this moment.
Yes.
But really, whether you are playing TTRPGs with a friend, whether you are, getting in character in something like an RPG, right? Just like you said, playing characters oftentimes even teaches us something about ourselves, or different perspectives of ourselves, or how we even connect with or perceive other people. And I think for me, I mean, how that kind of led into gaming, or how that kind of acting component, what drew me to sort of bringing it to life through content creation, was just the fact that, I mean, like you said, right? Inhabiting characters, whether they're in a video game or elsewhere, MMOs always appealed to me specifically, because in so many of the games that I played growing up, I remember thinking, how cool would it be if it wasn't just me in here, but if all the characters that were around me were literal people that I knew, and we could all bring stories to life, whether you're doing that, pen and paper, or you're doing it literally in an MMO. And I tell everybody in the MMOs that I play, I do everything from casual to hardcore. You'll catch me, raiding and doing endgame content. You'll catch me broadcasting and hosting events for it. But you'll also catch me being like, hey, yeah, I have a role-playing event all this weekend, so I will be going 8 hours a day. I will not be contactable. Love you all. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm immersed. Let me be. We're in this moment. Thank you. I'll see you all later.
Exactly, right? But the amazing thing about streaming and content creation is that those things, those characters, those people, those worlds we want to be a part of, right? Mm-hmm. They can leap off of just our screens, and they can now in so many ways become a bigger picture in our life. The communities we connect with. I mean, like you were saying, it's so hard to find clubs, groups, a regular D&D group. It's so difficult to actually find communities once you're out of a school setting and things. And I think for me, that power, that connection, whether it's the stories we share in games, or the way that we come together to share moments in our games, to create communities, to connect, to uplift each other, particularly too, because, growing up, I didn't have a lot of friends that shared a ton of similar interests. Eventually, I found niches and groups that did, and people who were into it. But the amount of reach that you have when we can use the internet, when we can literally all log in together and play a game, or we can stream, chat, hang out, have these amazing events and communities, it brings it to life for you. And you feel that presence of these communities and these games and these stories that you love there. So for me, it felt like a natural extension. I always felt the same about the stage, that being able to share a moment with people in a theater, a single performance that will never be exactly the same again, a single stream, right, that won't be exactly the same. Whether you're inhabiting a character or you're playing games and telling stories and coming together, there's still that sense that we all get to be a part of something in a shared moment and get to treasure it. And I love that.
That's really something beautiful. And I think a lot of people, when they hop into the content creation space, go, yeah, I want to find my niche. I want to build a community. But how do you do it? Because that's the hard part, right? Like, you're like, I have a dream and I want to build a space. And there's the idea of like, if I build it, they will come. But you have to build it in a particular way. How do you build a space that is welcoming, that allows people to connect, that allows it to be what you envisioned it to be? Because there's a difference of seeing it then versus doing it.
Oh gosh, yes. I mean, like, honestly, I feel like if we had spoken about anything at all in context before this moment, talking about being in the content creation space for years, both of us, right? It's something that even now, years into it, is a question I think we all ask ourselves. How do we continue to create and moderate big open communities, right? I mentioned, obviously we're here celebrating Pride Month, and I mentioned that I myself am LGBTQIA+, right? So to me, that's always an aspect of a welcoming, community or environment, things that I know from that experience that are foundational to me and what I would want to be somebody coming into space with that. But one of the biggest things I think about creating a welcoming community, and we hear this phrase tossed around so much online, the biggest thing is not only looking at the communities that you yourself are a part of and that you identify with, and that maybe what makes you feel safe in those spaces, but also being proactive, listening, researching, reading, thinking, hearing other people's experiences and stories, because you can set foundations of what a welcoming community is, right? A friendly face, no hate speech, whatever you want to moderate or curate in your chat specifically, whether or not you are, advocates for certain topics, mental health, things like that, right? Which, I oftentimes talk about to sort of make it inclusive, make it welcoming, because, mental health carries its own stigmas and many people have trouble finding spaces to talk about it. But when it comes down to it, you have to take stock of the things that you know and need, but then also be willing to listen to what creates a safe space for a lot of people. And I think a lot of times that comes down to figuring out what kind of cornerstones matter to you as a creator, what you're looking at, what kind of community you're hoping to foster, and then looking at those kinds of pillars. And then, like I said, just paying attention to the larger field, because there are times where I know I've said something on stream, I've had a friend or somebody or a chat member or a community member or moderator afterwards be like, hey, you know what? Like, from my experience with X, Y, or Z, this was actually a thing or that, and I felt like this might have been really important to bring up and for you to keep in mind. And I think when we encounter those kinds of situations, we have to just gracefully accept that we don't know everything with our own experience. Right. So I think a lot of it is identifying, those pillars of things that matter to you, your values, what you want your community to also embody and value, but then not being afraid to really listen to what it means to be inclusive, welcoming, diverse, and how you take into account many lived experiences other than your own and try to be conscious of them.
Yes, I love that, right? And it begins with, yes, that reflection of what matters to me? What do I really want to build this community off of? And how do I then bring other people who understand, who support, and who are also equally open to letting me know and helping me grow in this space, right? Because it's part of a conversation, because as one person, right, as human beings, we have such a very narrow experience in what we can know and how we can connect. And so allowing people to converse and let you know, it's hard. It was just a couple months ago, I had somebody message me like, hey, just so you know, I prefer if you didn't reference my pronouns, and was like, I didn't even think of that, and I'm so sorry. But even though, of course, my brain, I was like, I'm embarrassed, I should have never done that. But I'm glad that they at least felt comfortable letting me know, and that allowed me to make sure that we could have that conversation moving forward. And I feel like that resonates a little bit with what you're saying, of saying, you got to be open to listening. You got to be open to growing.
Yeah, I mean, so much on the internet, right? We see these echo chamber effects where it's really easy to put our opinion out there and to also then just wholly focus in on our opinion. Did people like it? Did people comment on it? What did people think about it? Who was validating it? Did I get enough attention? Did I get no attention? Does my opinion matter, right? We end up just kind of either curating our own feed so that we only see people who agree with us, or just focusing so much on our own voice that we forget that in our games, in our gaming space and online and as content creators, there are so many different perspectives and voices. And no person is going to be flawless with this, right? I mean, just like you said, there are going to be moments where even if you are the best intentioned individual, something happens and you're just like, oh man, I am embarrassed about the fact that actually I did not speak very gracefully about this, or I missed something, or I didn't think about something, right? But so much, if we can overcome that reaction to then just lock down and be like, well, I don't care about that. That doesn't have to do with me, right? And we can instead just go, okay, well, what does that say about the gaming space, or what does that say about the spaces that we share? How can I think bigger than myself? Maybe there are certain things that after some consideration, after some thought, you're like, I don't know if that's something I want to give a ton of weight to, which is fair in certain topics or issues, right?
Yeah.
But other times, just like you said, you go, oh, hey, I'm sorry. You learn a little bit more, or you give a different context. And honestly, you come out of any of those experiences better, having a bigger picture of kind of the communities that we're a part of and what really makes spaces that we all enjoy the vibe of, no matter who we are.
There's that comfort where you can find a place being home. That doesn't mean that it's perfect, but it's a place where you feel comfortable being you and allowing people to see you who you are. That's difficult to create, especially digital, where your face is the only face that's often seen and everyone else's is a nice mystery and a name that they made up right on the internet. And I mean, we all have made up names right now. Who cares, right? But it's a weird, let's acknowledge a slight absurdity and seriousness at the same time of the platforms that we're creating on, right? Like when we come in here, like, my name is Caustic Phoenix. That is a name that I just picked out of because I liked the way it sounded, right? Like this is, I mean, granted, that's why my mother chose my name Rebecca too. So, so I guess it's not that, but we're here and we're in these places and we're creating such comfort and vulnerability and fun with what we see is just names as a placeholder. And I think it's a really interesting concept when we look at it and what it means to actually build relationships that matter, because they don't have to be in person. They don't have to showcase what someone looks like to be able to feel like you can connect and laugh and play with people.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, right? It's so funny to me because we talked earlier about theater, right? Or training and what you might tie into content creation. One of the first things that I always tell people when they're talking about how do I getting used to talking to a camera, right? Is that I always say, you have to not just look at the camera. You have to imagine the people behind the camera. You're not just turning to look and being like, camera, hello. Maybe at the start it's like that, where you're just like, oh, right, they say you should look in the camera a lot. Hello.
Constantly. Never look away. Don't even bother blinking.
But the real difference is when you start to realize that even if you can't see them, all those people behind those names are people sitting in their own rooms, walking around with their phone, right? And that when you're speaking to them, you are speaking to someone. And it's so funny to me because I think that hits home so much when you're at live events or when you are, at conventions or things. I this last year got to go, and I see Lithy, who's here in the chat, who was actually on stage with me at Final Fantasy XIV's Fan Fest in Europe this past year as we did some casting and some events for them. But the thing that blows my mind the most is when you're walking around and somebody yells like Rook, and you turn around and they're like, it's me, Egg Fart Man 2021. And you're like, and they're like, and this is my beautiful wife and our 2 children, and I have a rich life, me, Egg Fart Man. And
please tell me his children went by like the devil's eggs, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We love Egg Fart Man. Yes.
We love Egg Fart Man. We stand him. But it's such a beautiful reminder, right? That yes, we put these personas on, we pick a name that we like, or we relate to something in it, and we want to share ourselves in these ways. But behind every name, behind every person, behind every player, whether you see them or not, although we are on camera, so we're oftentimes the ones that are the most perceived, but it doesn't negate the fact that there are all these people behind all these incredible interactions that you have online.
Yes. I feel like this also shows, like, even on social media, because let's not pretend content creation only exists on Twitch and YouTube, right? It's on every social platform and in real life. And like, there's this curation as we're doing it, but it makes me think of the difference between some social posts of like where they use it as their personal diary versus this is a conversation. And it changes not only like the initial posts they do, but the way they interact with people, who responds back to them, and how they can also create a space there. Like this might also just be social platforms evolving, because I remember when we used to just take pictures of like our food for Instagram and that was it. Like this was our food diary. Or was I the only one who did that? I swear that was a thing. That was certainly not just a me thing.
It was a thing.
Okay, good. Yes. So we all took pictures of our food, but we've kind of evolved now to a space where we ask questions, or we prompt discussion, or when we're tweeting something else, we're thinking of who we think is going to respond to this. Like, I'm not just sending things out into the ether, right? As fun as that is sometimes. There's an intention when we're writing something, or when we're creating a Twitch stream, or whatever it is, that these are the people that we hope that it responds to. Like, Egg Fart Man, this tweet is for you and other people who are like you, right? But it's true. Like, it has an intended audience, and that's how you find people. You don't just hope it randomly lands among the right people, but you try to speak to them directly. You try to find those people, in that pursuit, that conversation, that directness is actually purposeful in how we handle it. Now, you play a lot of social media games as well. What platforms are you all on?
Well, I mean,
sorry.
No, it's good. I think we can all kind of relate to this, the slightly bitter laugh of, oh yes, social media in 2024.
Yes.
I mean, from everything from the great Twitter X debacle to at this point, I feel like social media is so up in the air. Is TikTok going to be banned in the United States? Who knows? I guess we'll continue to find out. It's just been an ongoing thing. I mostly do things through Twitter and Instagram, although I haven't gone as full in Instagram as a lot of people have. So, those were kind of the two. And then obviously Twitch and YouTube, I also maintain myself. But it's wild because, of course, right now we've all got our short lists of like, what are the backup apps? Oh, yeah, well, I have an account on Blue Sky. And also, what about, and I dabble a little bit here and there. I'll put Threads. Yeah, right. Dabble, put a few videos up on TikTok or things like that. Just in case everything else gets set on fire.
Yeah.
We'll go
or
over
like,
there.
just to make sure somebody else doesn't have your name. Like, I'm not on Kick, but I have to go on there to make sure somebody else doesn't get the Caustic Phoenix name and then starts representing me. Like, so you have an account on everything.
Yes, you do. Which is not something you think about when you first go into content creation. Although thankfully the word spreads a little bit more now, but like, get those accounts locked down because it's wild when you get that one where it's like, okay, I've got the name on everything except for this single platform. So let's try to contact support and like try to work it into all our graphic overlays so it doesn't stick out weird, that it's like, yeah, I'm Rookuri everywhere except for on this one website. And then
it just really adds a bump in the road in your conversation, doesn't it? Just like,
it does. How about you? What social media have you been keeping up with?
Yes. It depends on how I feel this week. That sort of take.
No, that resonates.
Yes. But I mean, and you understand, you talk about mental health and how we have to balance ourselves and choose. There are some months where I have the capacity to handle social media. And sometimes it also depends on not just what's going on in my personal life, but there are times where I'm like, I can't get on Facebook because how some people are talking about some topics, I'm like, I can't be a part of it. It's disheartening, or it's uncomfortable, or it becomes overwhelming and it kicks my anxiety up. And it's like, nope, not today. It's an important conversation, but it's not my battle to handle on Facebook right now.
Oh, honestly, that resonates so much. I mean, it's one of those things where I think as a content creator, a lot of times there's this mindset that's put forth, right? That we have to give everything to it at all times, 24/7. You see the nonstop stream marathons. You see the, here's my 50,000 TikTok videos. You see there's this sense that like, if you become a content creator, you just have to become a content machine. And in certain regards, there are reasons people do this, right? Like there are certain ways that if you are just flooding the algorithms and stuff, like there is a chance you'll get more traction. There is a chance as people make partner pushes that, if you are extending your visible, searchable, findable hours on Twitch, that shows good returns for you. But something that is the bigger picture that so many people forget, just like you were saying, is the actual balance of our lives and the things that we do enjoy, create, or do for work, right? And I think that's one of the biggest things that in time and content creation, I have found to be so crucial, right? How do you keep from burning out? How do you keep playing the same games that, for so many years? How do you do these things? And a lot of it is exactly like you were saying, picking or choosing. What do I have the energy for? What do I need to still support myself, take care of my mental health, go touch grass when I need to touch grass? As much as we all joke about it, like, who would ever want to touch grass? Sometimes it's good to touch the grass.
Yes.
So you have to go eat real food,
Yes.
sleep. Like it's so true though. And I find that for me personally, in balancing my own anxiety, in balancing my own mental health needs and energy levels, I'm right there with you in that social media was a big one for me, that early on I was just like, you know what? I have to choose how I engage with this. When I engage with this, I need to know when I am just getting so sucked into it that it's not doing anything constructive for me. Or like you were saying, vitriolic topics, all this kind of stuff. We're here Pride Month, right? And I mean, even just seeing things in the US with all of the battles from women's reproductive rights to, our amazing trans family, and to all these other things that have just been going on. There are times where when you are scrolling, you're just like, and I feel like I got run over by a truck after looking at this for 10 minutes.
It's funny because you're right. That is the exact feeling. It's a weird physical, even though this is something that you're reading, they're separate from you. They're not even tagging us specifically into these conversations. But when you read them and the comments and the conversations that are happening, and this exists in your world and that it's impacting you and it's impacting people you care about, it really does physically feel like draining, dead.
Yes.
And that's important. I think sometimes we see mental and physical health as two very separate things, as if the two don't impact and are threaded together very significantly.
No, they're literally the two sides of health. What are you? A body and your brain / person, right? Like, you are both of those things. So you have to take care of them. And I think that was something over the years I've tried to be very meticulous about, but also to be very forgiving about, because I think a lot of us, or at least some of us that are like me, will beat yourself up a lot when you take time for yourself, or when you are scheduling things in such a way that it allows you flexibility or breathing room, right? Or you feel like you're never doing enough. But there comes a point where you have to realize that you can chase that goalpost of what enough is forever and never reach it. And so figuring out what is enough for you, for your energy, for your time, early on, when I was pushing for partner and things like that, initially I did a lot of long streams. I do double decker days where I do like a 4-hour stream, a break, a 4-hour stream. We'd block those throughout the entire week. And over time, I was just like, I cannot keep this up. And for my life and the things I need to take care of in it, for cooking myself good meals, for taking care of my physical and mental health, for cleaning our house, for doing whatever prep, videos, editing, whatever social media I can, I was just like, I need to take 3-day weekends, because like literally one of those days is just a work day and 2 of those days might be relaxation or social time or whatever else. And then, I'm going to schedule other stuff accordingly and look at what I really have to give energy wise. And can I really give my all during that? Then great. That's also valuable. And it's the same with like social media. How much energy do I put into this? Where do I start just eating away at my own self to make this happen, instead of being able to invest back into myself and, into others? And it's not to say that there aren't times where you have to work really hard, you got to really buckle down, but it is something that we have to keep track of, because it gets away from you so fast.
It really does. It almost would be easier if our mental or emotional capacity was in a currency. Like, I know sometimes we use a language of like spoons. We only have so many spoons in a day, right? But it would be nice to be like, I could physically see it depleting, right? Now I know when to stop. And instead, some of us, especially when we're pushing towards a goal, and we just say, well, only for this week. Well, then it's almost maybe for one more week. Well, after this, then I'll recover. And then after a while, it becomes like, but I'm used to this. I'm used to abusing my body. I'm used to abusing, myself to push for these goals and get it done. We've normalized an overworking and overcommitted lifestyle to others. And it's hard because we can justify it a million ways. We can say like, well, I'm seeing the growth, or I'm clearly having a good impact with my community. And we can list off whatever achievements and we can say that it's worth it. And it's hard to talk back, and it's even harder to step back.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, hearing you even say that, I'm like, yes, the thing I've done for years of my life. Yeah, I'll take a break in 2 weeks once this thing is done.
Yeah.
In 3 weeks, then I'll have,
Yep. I'll plan my sickness around this.
Exactly, right? Well, I can't get sick here because I am booked both weekends. So
Yes.
It's wild. I mean, I had a moment where I realized that so I've been doing content creation for about 8 years, and about 6 of those full time. And I realized this past year, I was like, I have never taken time off other than something for like a family vacation that I had to go to. I mean, I love, they're fun,
Yes.
but, not like just for myself, not just to take time off or relax, for conventions, for work that I'm doing. Sure. Like if I have to prep a lot of stuff and it means I'm having to mitigate some other live hours or things. But I've never in those years taken time off for myself. So this year, one of my goals that I set was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to take a month off. I'm just going to do it. And I'll do still some things and some podcast other stuff in there, but I'm going to actually take time off. And then of course, scheduling that was like, but I can't do it because these game releases are happening in June and July and August. Okay. So then I'll do it. I don't know. Like
wait. You mean the studios didn't contact you and check with your schedule first? What? Oh,
no,
come on.
I did not.
If only like, hey, let's just put a tentative vote out there. When would you all like to see this game release? What's going to work with your schedule?
Yeah, please. That'd be so nice.
Yes.
Please, gaming companies. Thank you. But, I think it is so important that we all have to take stock of it at some point and go, okay, when am I actually going to give back to myself, and not just say like, oh, well, maybe in 2 weeks if I can find some time, but to actually just say, you know what? I deserve this time. I need this time. I have to give back. And I mean, of course, like figuring out how you balance that with content creation, with, gigs, if you're doing them outside of even that or other stuff, it can be a bit of a juggling act. And no matter who you are, whether you're doing content creation or not, there's a lot of considerations in how you may or may not have leeway to do that. But even finding small ways to give back to yourself, it's something that I think we all have to do to just sustain ourselves, whether it's in the content creation environment or it's just to weather the storm that has been everything in the last like 5 years.
Yes.
So
yes.
Yeah.
And it's a good reminder too, that when we do time off, there's a difference, and different kind of things can be recharging in different ways. Like going out and touch grass. Some of you joked that you've never seen grass before or what that looked like, right? I get it, right? And what that means. And that can be good, but that doesn't always mean you're recharging, like you're resting. But it's like, imagine yourself as a battery, right? Not being used does not mean you're being recharged back up, right? Like at the end of the day, like when you mentioned like a family vacation, family is wonderful. We love them. I've never been on a family vacation that is actually restful, right? It's just, it's a different kind of fulfillment that's important, relational, that it helps you feel connected and builds the roots, but it's not the same thing. AJ, I see you've redeemed a hydrate for us. That's probably a good idea. We've not taken a drink on our own. It's actually perfectly timed with this conversation, right? Like, as we get so into what we're building, and we build momentum. And I think especially as content creators, that moment of pause. But I think this is for anyone too. Like as you start to see progress in your career, wherever you are, or when you start to see progress in a project that you've been working on, heck, maybe it's a Lego set that you can finally see the pieces coming through, that we build that momentum. And it's so hard for us to let go and realize that we can pick it back up whenever we're ready.
I mean, there's no right or wrong way to go about what gives back to you or defining that, right? I think a big thing for me with it is that at one point I just took hard stock. Like, what do I do in the week? And as I went through those things, or even if it was an hour of sitting on the couch scrolling through social media or whatever it was, I was just like, what am I doing in a week? Now, how do I feel at the end of those activities? Do I feel like this recharged me? Do I feel like, writing this little creative writing thing that I was doing recharged me? Do I feel like doing yoga recharged me? Do I feel like, chatting with people on Discord recharged me? Do I feel that about how I engage with social media? And I found that a disproportionate amount of those things coming out of them, I felt tired. I was like, I'm tired from this. It doesn't mean that I didn't enjoy aspects of it, like you were saying with family vacations and things, right? But I started to realize that a lot of the things that I was doing didn't necessarily recharge me. So if I was going to look for time to try to give myself energy back, whether that's taking a bath, whether that's, like you said, it's not always just I lay on the couch and do nothing. For me, a big one is that new experiences, new places, an activity, whether that's going to a new restaurant that I'm really excited about, or doing a festival or an event, going outside and seeing something new and interesting. It's those things give me back energy and creative energy where I feel like, hey, I can tackle more this week. I can do more. I have more ideas. I feel more inspired. And then as well, having time for myself that is just very quiet, right? Where I'm going, I will not divide myself and my attention between all my devices. And that's hard for me. I have to take my phone and go, I will not look at you. I am leaving you in a different room. I will, if I feel beholden to responding to people, I'll message and just say, hey, I'm actually just taking the night. So if I don't respond, that's why. And that makes me feel more like, I don't have to feel like, oh gosh, did they message me? Maybe I should, I don't want them to think that I am not interested, or I don't want to respond to them. So I started trying to set boundaries where I could have those quiet times that were just for me, where I could even try and hone in my own attention on just the small, simple thing that I was doing, as well as looking at what I'm doing outside. I started taking dance classes. I started doing, a bunch of other things that just gave back to me in a different way, that were recharging, and trying to cut out some of those other things that I was using to just fill time, but that weren't actually giving back to me specifically. And that's an important part of how we have to balance everything as well, because you can be doing a lot, but that's not to say that all those things are actually going to be kind of restoring you or empowering you to do more in the future,
Yes. Yeah. But you're doing these check-ins, and I think that's the most important part of what serves you. And you're right. And I'm glad you use this language, talking about boundaries and how people are understanding of it, because we create, let's be clear. I'm going to wrap myself out on this. We create scenarios. If I'm taking a shower, all in my head, I'm replaying whole conversations with people and they don't even realize they're a part of it. If I don't respond to someone, I think that they're upset, and I have to have and plan an entire conversation where I have to apologize and they respond back to it. And then, right. Yeah. We are all okay. See, Mari's in the same, we create scenarios all the time and how it plays out. And then when you go back and respond hey, I'm sorry. And then, I'm also the worst. If you send me an Instagram post, sometimes I don't respond for a week or two because I get overwhelmed and I don't answer. And then I go back and I'm I'm so sorry I didn't respond. And they're like, that's fine. Oh, I've been freaking out for 2 weeks over this.
Anxiety. Yeah, it's a wonderful, terrible thing. No, it's so true though, where I'll do the same thing. I'll keep a running list in my head of all these conversations or things, or that Instagram post, I'm like, oh yeah, somebody sent me that Instagram post 2 weeks ago and I still haven't responded. Yes. And I immediately just feel once again, exhausted. So knowing that it's okay to set those boundaries and curate those boundaries, right? Or even just to communicate hey, I'd love to hang out with you this week, but honestly, I just don't have the energy. And that's not because of you. I'm just exhausted. And I need to realize that about myself right now. And I need to protect that. And like, I promise, like, let's do something in the next few weeks. But let me get through this week and then let's touch base again. And I think that's something that's been, it's not easy to do, but it's something that definitely helps to start give you a bit more of a sense of control over aspects of your life. And I think something too with content creation, right, is that we oftentimes feel this need to always be connected from the creator standpoint. We don't want to be out of the loop. We don't want to miss something. We don't want to be too late on replying to something. We want to be relevant. And I recently, as we circle back to kind of mental health and stuff, this year for the first time, I started working with a therapist, and I encourage everybody to please get help and support if you need it, even if you don't think you like, even if you're like, oh, I don't know, like, is it really, if you think that you can benefit from professional support and resources, check it out. There's a ton of great organizations. And one that I always talk about is You Are Rad. So Rise Above the Disorder, youarerad.org. They were actually started by a World of Warcraft guild, and they internationally, I know, it's amazing.
I love
They
this.
internationally provide financial support. They even just provide somebody who will help you through the process of finding a professional to work with, because that's oftentimes a huge hurdle for folks trying to like identify who I can even work with. So all of this to say, it's been very illuminating and really interesting. And one of the things that we talked about recently was the idea of never pinning all of your worth on one thing. So I think as creators, we tend to pin our worth oftentimes intrinsically to our work in whatever way. And the parameters of that, that's always changing. Am I getting enough views? Oh, maybe I'm getting enough views, but am I getting enough social media engagement? Oh, I'm failing. I'm a failure. I'm not getting enough social media engagement. I haven't done as many streams as I wanted recently. Oh, I've been doing this other stuff, but I haven't done this. I am not keeping up with my clips. Whatever it is, right? And whether or not you're a content creator, there can be this tendency to pin all of our worth and our identity and the way that we decide to feedback about that. Like, how does this thing validate or invalidate who I am? How does it make me feel? And that sometimes we guilt ourselves in the larger picture to, well, if I'm doing anything but this thing, then I am not good enough. I'm not succeeding. If I'm not streaming 5 days a week, 7 days a week, 10 hours a day, if I'm not, then I am losing something, or I'm just not living up to something. But in reality, every single thing that we do, whether it's something casual for us, it's something giving back, like we've been talking about, whether it's, getting together with friends 2 times a week, whether it's your weekly D&D sesh, whether it's, cooking for yourself, whatever it is, right? Every single thing that we do actually does say something about us and speaks to our kind of value and worth. And it's just a different way of framing it, right? Like if I'm cooking, it's because, maybe I want to be able to create something. I want to create a space for myself where I can just have this task in front of me. I want to feed my body. I'm caring about my health. I'm caring about, putting care and love into what I do, or feeding people around me, partners or friends or that sort of thing. And that is a different kind of worth. If I'm playing D&D with friends once a week, that says that I'm collaborative and I, am creative and I want to do these things with other people and tell these stories, and that brings us joy and it connects me to others. And that is something that's just as worthwhile about me as any number of likes on a tweet.
Yes. Yes.
And it's hard to keep that in mind in this kind of atmosphere with social media and content creation.
Yeah, when there's like an actual numeric assignment that we can give to value how good someone is. I mean, there is a big understanding, like, numbers alone do not indicate someone's success as a content creator, right? And it depends on what your goal is. But there's still like this assumption, and even in a broader culture, when we get to know people, we ask like, what is their name? And then what is it that they do, right? Like that's our first 2 categories in trying to understand who this person is and how they fit into our life. But it's not fair for us and those around us to just pigeonhole ourselves into this one thing. It's not, we don't just do one thing. We don't just do our work and whatever it happens to be. But yeah, it's it's hard, and you're so right to appreciate the many different values and spaces that we can belong and connect. That's a hard lesson to learn, though.
Yeah, it's easier
How
said
dare
than done,
you say
right?
this? Yeah, like I
Trust me.
hear it. I just wanted to sink in for a second because it's such an important message that you shared with us, but it's such a difficult message when we see it all the time. And even I know some social media platforms are changing a little bit, like Instagram hides sometimes like how many likes there are. It's not consistent. I thought they were going to remove them altogether, but they're not. I don't know. They're picking and choosing. Right. But like, there's this balance to say there's so much more, right, in who we are. Yeah. And there's so many more skills in many avenues in your life. And Mari's right. Like that you are developing that are more than just in this one space. And I think we limit ourselves and then we don't even think about how that brings value to everything else that we love. Oh,
Yeah.
These are hard
It's
and personal
true.
conversations. How dare you?
I'm so sorry,
dare
everybody.
you.
I apologize. I really shouldn't have. No, I mean, it is hard, right? But it's like anything. It is something we practice. And I know I have been practicing it a lot recently when I have that go-to moment where I'm like, oh man, well, what did I even do today? Nothing. What a waste. And then I'm like, okay, well, now hold on. Actually, I went out to the garden and I did a bunch of stuff in there and I took care of a bunch of the flowers, and that's been a huge thing because like that's been a great way for me to learn. We just got a house a year ago, and having a garden has been brand new to me, having had no outdoor space in our city apartments prior to this, right? So it's like I've been learning, I've been empowering, I've been learning new skills, I've been nurturing and taking care of things and hoping desperately that I don't murder them.
Please live, please live, please live. Yeah.
Right. But it's one of those things where trying to change our own dialogues in how we even engage with the ways that we speak to ourselves or the way that we uplift or tear ourselves down. It's never easy. But when you start to kind of acknowledge and then like build this framework, like, okay, yeah, actually, what did I do today? Well, you know what? I actually have made some huge strides in how I'm taking care of the garden. And this year I knew how to take care of the roses. So I went out and I did the things I needed to do to take care of the roses. And I did all the dishes and all this other, and when you start looking at that and then thinking about what value there is in that to you, what it gives back to you, it's something rather than just jumping immediately to trying to berate yourself for it. It's something that can be a huge help. And I think we all have to learn that kindness in our online communities, but for ourselves and as content creators, especially because I think it's so easy to just, like you said, when worth has a numerical value in this space, even if that's not entirely true, but it oftentimes feels like it does, right?
Yes.
It's hard to counterbalance that.
I love though that we were trying. We are doing our best to counterbalance. But I think this is important. Like as you and I are talking here, and as we have an amazing chat who's adding their own experiences in this, we have to realize that we're not alone in this counterbalance. Like these are the conversations that we should be having. And one, recognizing when we fail, right? Because like when we're talking like seagrass, what was that? Right? Trying to keep our plants alive. Those are really hard. They're so finicky, and it would be so much easier if they had a voice or at least eyes that would, we could communicate with. Yes. Something in this case, right? Or when we talk about like overworking ourselves, they're saying next week, like the fact that so many of us are saying, yeah, that's me. I've been there, right? It doesn't just help us empathize, but it should help prompt us to say, as we work to put forward, one, we're going to be understanding of each other. Like when you need to take time off, I'm going to be there supporting and be like, yes, do it. I'm proud of you. Why didn't you do this before? It's better that you're doing it now, right? And giving that space and encourage, like it is so important that we don't have to do this alone. That as we try to talk back to those voices, whether it's in our head or the social media platforms or unkind people on the internet, that we do build that community of those foundational values. Look at all this tying back together, right? Foundational values that helps us remember who we are and bring out the best of all parts of who we are. This has been such a vulnerable conversation. I want us to take a little bit of a 5-minute breather here at this. And then I want us to come back and talk more about what it takes to be vulnerable on the internet and how that is a challenge in and of itself and choices that we make. So, Rookuri, you are absolutely amazing. Thank you. 5-minute friends. We'll see you all in a hot second. Don't go too far. Stand up, go look at a tree, touch some grass, drink some water, Pet your plants. I don't know. All right, friends, we are back in our second part of Pink Pixels. We've been having an amazing conversation with Rookuri here. Thank you so much again for joining us. We've been talking about the content creation stream area. We've been talking about taking care of ourselves, taking breathing moments. And of course, this is all taking place right now on very digital platforms where we're talking about our challenges, what we experience as we empathize and create community together. But these are all things that are very public, even in discords, right, where there are invitation to these spaces, right? We are sharing a lot about ourselves. Rook, what is it like to have so many people in the world know so much about you? Like even right now, like we're seeing your space, your background, where you're at in your home, right? What is it like to invite people from all around the world on the internet into where you are and who you are?
You know, it's wonderful. I mean, I personally love it. You know, it's one of those things where I think that being so visible and being so present for a lot of folks is something that not everybody finds the same level of comfort in, but I've always enjoyed getting to share aspects of my life with the community. And I've tried, you know, as much as possible within that to also still maintain, you know, my own sense of privacy or life, and to know that not everything that we do has to be public all the time. I am definitely, well, no, I swear it doesn't have to be. But you know, a lot of times for me, that kind of ends up relating to more social media stuff, right? Where I'm not always documenting every single thing that I do and sharing it, but key events, specific things, you know, I might take some pictures and put them up. So I tend to maintain a bit more privacy in those areas. But when it comes to stream, I mean, I think there is a lot to be said about being open and about sharing about your experience and life, though, of course, within the sort of safe boundaries that we construct, because I know over the years, I think every content creator will end up with some stories about times where boundaries were pushed or moderators had to step in or stuff like that happens. So protecting that space, but then still getting to share it and to make so many memories with so many people over the years is really special.
Yes, yes. There's a balance, right? Of saying, yeah, there's risk here, but there's so much benefit to be gained when you have these conversations, when you get to connect and you build things that are meaningful because they're real. They're not just something fake that you're developing in this persona, but it's who you are and people are resonating, engaging with you on that level. What has been some of your most fulfilling moments in sharing who you are in the gaming space, whether it's on a social media platform, maybe live in chat when you're talking about who you are, what you do, right? There's got to be a moment where you're like, yes, I'm really glad that this is something that I do.
You know, oh my gosh, there are so many, but I think a lot of times it's just those moments when people take the time to share what your presence in their life means to you, you know, where somebody will say something like, hey, I just wanted to let you know your stream really got me through the last couple months, or hearing you talk about, this has been a big one, right? As we're talking about Pride Month, this is one that always makes me smile so much. Hearing folks say in your community, everybody was so welcome, and you talk about your own sexuality and you talk about a lot of other aspects to that, and I realized that I am gay or bi or, you know, whatever it is, and I've been able to embrace that part of myself. And we've seen community members who've like gone through that journey and just this year have announced that they're engaged to an amazing partner, or it's wonderful. That kind of thing, those sorts of moments, I mean, it always really touches me when people say, hey, you always make even my worst days a little brighter, or I will always remember this one stream when this ridiculous thing happened, or you know, I keep a folder on my computer where I screenshot a lot of them. But then of course, it's just amazing. I mean, the last few years I've been at a lot of events too where people have had the chance to say that in person. And I think, you know, I mentioned the EU Fan Fest for 14 recently, but the one that was held in North America before that was even more special in those regards, because just so many people coming up and saying like, hey, it has meant so much to me seeing you on the desk for Race to World First, or seeing you cast esports events, because I never get to see, it seems so rare that I get to see other women in that space, or, you know, that I get to see people like you, or, you know, your mental health talks helped me realize what was going on with me. Or so those kinds of moments where you just get to like actually hear from somebody the impact that you make, those are the ones that I think really, really make me go, I am so glad. No matter what, I'm so glad that I got to do this and that I get to do this.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's amazing how a small little Discord message can be like, hey, thank you for the stream. It really helped me today. I was going through a tough time. Like it changes. It is a cloud 9 that you can ride for the rest of the week. Like it is better than any adrenaline caffeine induced drink you can purchase. It is better than any chocolatey dessert I have ever had. It is the most fulfilling and kind and sweetest thing you can name. But it is when you see that there's this impact that you have made on somebody else's life. And I love that you mentioned the variety of topics, because I think, you know, as humans, we all have very different challenges of what we're going through. And in our life, that's going to ebb and flow. There are going to be some weeks where it's like, oh, it's just work. And then there's other things that are like, it's much more tied to my identity, right? And they ebb and flow of what those difficulties or the intensity of those challenges are. But you help out with all of that, right? You see people and you connect on that human level, no matter where they are. Now, this is Pride Month. Yay. Of course, in good jest, right? Pride Month is a nice substitute when we don't have love all the time year round. Even though we're working on it. Sometimes it feels like it's all just shoved into one month at this point, but it's progress. It's a starting point.
Progress, sure.
That's why we have the month, is because it's not enough year round, and it helps raise awareness and lifts up the stories and awareness of the needs, the resources, the individuals, and how we can continue to move forward. That's the idea. In the gaming space, it's been interesting. I'm going to choose a very neutral term right now. It's been interesting to see how studios, organizations, content creators embrace and talk about Pride Month. And I was curious about your take on this, especially being part of the community, as you see different organizations starting to release their tweets and their blog posts and their streams and their charity events. And what is it like to see all of this happen in this month kicking off?
You know, I always think it's exciting. I loved your very neutral kind of, yes, let's be very tactful about the way we phrase. Yes. It's one of those things for me where I think the greater discourse is important, right? We should talk about this because, like you said, it's never a matter of 1 month where an issue matters, right? For people that are LGBTQIA+, the struggle, the joys, the highs, the lows, it is a year-long, lifelong thing that doesn't like just happen. It's not like we all wake up on June 1st and we're like,
today.
It's today. Today I'm gay. Like, you know, it's not.
It's a very gay morning. Yes.
Yeah. It's not like we just wake up and there's like rainbows over past the window and we're just like, amazing. Finally, at last,
the gay
one
fairy
time of year
finally came to you. Congratulations.
Exactly. I mean, you know, it's magical. We all love that it happens, but you know, kind of a bummer that it only happens for 1 month a year. No, it's something that we live with, right? So. Of course, there's always this conversation that's important to have about where is this support coming from? What is it motivated by? And what does it mean to have a longer term actual engagement with the communities that you sometimes bring out to be like, hey, we're cool and inclusive and diverse and stuff. And we love the homosexuals. And you know,
did I say that correctly? Sorry.
Did I read it off of the card right? Okay. Oh yes. Okay. It's Gay Pride Month. All right.
Yes.
But at the same time, I will say this much. As somebody who grew up in a very conservative home and who, you know, with a lot of my own journey felt so in the dark about it, never was allowed to engage with anything even close to queer representation. Just didn't even realize it was a thing until probably high school. And then I went, oh, that's what's happening to me.
Yes.
you know,
The piece
you would
fits in the
really,
puzzle now. It makes
yes,
sense. I've been putting it in the wrong puzzle the entire time. No wonder
exactly.
nothing
You're like,
fits.
oh yeah, no, I'm not straight actually,
Yeah.
is what that means. And you can be attracted to people of the same gender or a
Mhm.
varying gender spectrum. So like, it seems like something that I think, especially for many people, I hope
Mhm.
they more and more don't have to have that experience of feeling like you are fumbling around in the dark. You have no idea what any of this could mean, except that it's probably all sinful. And if you were to discover what it was, and then you're going straight to hell. And like it's just one of those things, right? So in those regards, Pride, that rainbow illuminating even a single month of the year, is a much needed light that I wish I had had to such a degree growing up. And seeing more companies embrace it, even if it is a bit performative, seeing more stations talk about it, seeing more content creators be open about it, seeing so many of our spaces, even some of our favorite games, put in Pride events, right? These are all things where, yes, corporate money like making will always dictate that people aren't going to be doing things for truly altruistic reasons.
Right.
But the impact that even one confused kid seeing some of this out there, seeing celebration and joy, seeing it be welcomed even by just certain communities, right, is something that I think is so profound. And for many people, it will light up that darkness, that puzzle where they're suddenly like, oh, this is the piece. And it goes right there. I'm pansexual, actually.
Ah, yes.
Oh.
But I love this metaphor, the story that we're telling here, because it really is like seeing Pride Month as illumination is so important. Like it's almost like it's meant to be this big flash of lights. Put the fireworks up because yeah, you are not. It's not just the community that's here celebrating, but it's meant to be a symbol to those who are in those dark places and those caves, those insulated areas where they're in communities where they've never heard of it. They've never heard the language of how they can talk about themselves or the types of relationships that they can have and who they are and how they fit into this. And knowing that there are different pictures, there are different puzzles that are out there. We're mixing some of our metaphors at this point. So, but everyone's still following, right? Life is complicated, so our metaphors can be complicated. But that's what this is. And I appreciate, right, that challenge of like, yeah, corporates are going to corporate, but this is part of that story, that illumination. And it's good to have whoever we can have in this space to help bring that story to light, to bring that light to others.
Yes. Yes. And to feature and uplift those people that are out there in whatever way, right? Like with Pride parades, everybody participating, but also in the content creation spaces to uplift and promote those much needed visibilities for diverse gaming in our gaming landscape. And especially at a time as well when we just hear so much rhetoric and pushback as games have started to be more diverse. Of course, we get this backlash of like, oh, this game has token representation. Oh, this, this historical game with a black samurai could never happen because black people didn't exist until much later. And it's like, you all realize that like that character is based off of a legitimate, real historical figure that existed and lived a whole life in Japan, right?
That's uncomfortable truths for some people, right? Like, it's the same kind of message of like, well, gay people didn't exist until recently. Like, no. You've just suppressed history significantly. Like,
yes. Absolutely, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's ridiculous. And yet we see this pushback because people, there's many reasons, and you can watch a lot of great YouTube essays about it. But
right.
I mean, in one way, people feel threatened as other things come into a space that they've had a personal or identifying connection with. And if those things are outside of their experience, oftentimes a lot of the first initial response by certain communities is to just be like, I don't want that. That's not for me. But really, when we get down to it, if you're in a game and you're riding a dragon and you're swinging a sword and you're blasting spells off, like,
yes,
we're all playing games to experience something different than our reality, right? In many ways, or to explore facets of our reality in a different way, or to just kick back and have fun, or whatever it is. And so it's so important, I think, to to have moments of focused visibility, because of course we want visibility and the integration of diversity in so many layers to be throughout all of our games. We are stronger for having more of this. We have more creative ideas and landscapes and all kinds of things, more people to connect with games over if we're all experiencing a diverse range of different kinds of games and pieces of art and creators that are brought in. But until we get to a point where that is just our baseline always, you know, having moments where we can really say, hey, this is a thing, and we are proud, and we are like not ashamed, whether it's any other focused month, you know, featuring minorities or any other communities. It's something just to be able to be like, hey, these voices that oftentimes have been, like we said, erased from history or suppressed or, you know, not given their due are here, and that's awesome. It's great. Even if you think it's not for you, it's still great because it's for someone who probably really needs it. So it's important.
Yes, I love that. And I don't know, it makes me think of some of the layering behind this and the unique challenges and how we approach this. Maybe it's because as a woman myself, when I play most video games, especially growing up, not many of them were women. So there was never a thing like the video game character has to be exactly me or I can't relate. Like that's not, because, you know, I love, you know, space dragons and shooting. Pew, pew. Like I've never done that in real life, as it turns out. Surprise. Never once casted a spell and had it work. I did try. It's just the not working part that never happened. Right? Like there are things that occur and they don't, but we still find ways to relate. And it's that balance when we engage in these stories that are different from us on what we choose to focus on in terms of similarity and how we choose to approach things that are different. Like when I hear that and it's like, this is a love story that is not a love story of mine, I can still appreciate it because as humans, we love, and I can relate to that. It doesn't have to be the same kind of love for me to be able to acknowledge or appreciate or value that story. And then I can appreciate the differences and giving me a new perspective on what this looks like uniquely for them. Like it's a choice because similarities and differences are going to exist, but it's how we choose to approach and what we choose to value. Okay, going back to where we very first started. This was entirely accidental, but it's happening, right? Like what do we really care about when we choose to interact with people? When we look at a person or we look at ourselves and we ask ourselves what matters, that's really how it then changes how we approach people who are similar or who are different than us. Like people living similar lives, that's fine. People who are hateful, that's not how I approach things. That's not something I value. You know, right? Like that's where we're gonna have some problems, and your differences are gonna create problems, right? In this, there's a difference in how we approach these things, and when it comes to Pride Month, right? It's really nice that hopefully it creates the momentum and opportunities that momentum continues. For you, what have been some things in terms of representation in the gaming space that you've been excited about, that you love seeing, and that you hope has had a greater impact, not just that it had with yourself, but perhaps with a larger community?
Oh man, there's so many. I mean, oh my gosh, there have been so many wins, which, like you were saying, coming from a landscape where it was like, what game shall I play? Edgy boy, blonde edition, edgy boy, brown haired edition, edgy boy. No, I mean, there have been great women in gaming and all sorts of characters in gaming, even non-binary characters in gaming for ages, but we definitely have more of them and more nuanced depiction. You know, because I work so closely and in the last year have come to work so closely with the esports scene, I think one that is outside of just some of those more general kind of depictions or characters that we're getting, or female-led franchises like Horizon. It's something where seeing women or non-binary folks in the esports scene is like the biggest, most exciting thing for me ever, because like, as somebody who has been in it more myself, it has been both better and sometimes worse than I anticipated. I was really nervous when I first started getting asked, in particular, to do World of Warcraft casts. because, and this is every single game has communities, has their problem communities. So I don't want this to sound too targeted just specifically to World of Warcraft. But as somebody that had played a lot of competitive Overwatch, some things happened and they were oftentimes not good. And most of them had to do with a feminine sounding voice on a mic, right? And the level of vitriol that I was exposed to in games like that were some of the most shocking and like formative to me, because, you know, for a long time I played so many single player games and I had said, these are spaces for me that I can enjoy and that I can play with other people. And I love games. And it hadn't been until later that I even had the realization that there might be people who didn't think that I should love games or that I should play games with them because of something to do with me that wasn't my skill or wasn't anything like that, but was some other aspect of myself that they found unlikable in their space. And with that, I had a lot of apprehensions with casting World of Warcraft because, you know, it's a long established community. It has a very strong esports scene. And I was very worried. It was like, if I'm going to go on cam, quite honestly, you know, am I going to be getting a bunch of DMs? Are people going to be really awful? And to be honest, there were some, and, you know, it's always interesting to me to see how the baseline in esports scenes is still so oftentimes hostile towards women, even if it's not trying to be actively. You know, just the general kind of conversations you'll see even in chat where I'll say something and then a male caster will repeat verbatim what I said, and you'll see the comments go, Rook doesn't know what she's talking about, to this guy literally verbatim has actually quoted me, and it's like, he's so smart and he knows everything. He's so good at this video game.
So insightful.
And
much wow.
So insightful. Absolutely incredible. I mean, and it's funny because people don't even realize a lot of times that they're doing it, right? It's just a subconscious thing where they just give more weight to those masculine voices. And because of that, I've seen as well how it affects you know, players, you know, either non-gender conforming or women on teams, and how much more focused attention they get from people for their failures, for all kinds of things. We were doing a tournament, Eve Ascension, uplifting women, that we've done for a couple of years now in WoW, which is an incredible one that's all cast by women and non-binary folks, and all of the players are women and non-binary folks, and almost all of the supporting staff is also women and non-binary folks, which is amazing.
Yes.
But there was a huge backlash online about it. A huge campaign that started where people were like, well, why don't we have a men-only tournament and all stuff? And it's like, well, you don't realize that all the teams are already men-only.
Done.
Except for like one.
Sorry that the two women who were competing were impeding on your space.
Right? Yeah.
They're new this year. Every other year you've had your moment.
Right? And it's so funny though. So like all of this to say, right, you get those sides of it, where then you see, you know, male players in the space who are speaking up for it and are like, get over yourselves. What are you talking about? This is awesome. I'm glad they're doing this. To even community members and to many of the chats during the events, which I was very surprised to see oftentimes are positive and oftentimes do have a lot of good things to say, or, you know, we're very welcoming in ways that I was nervous that they wouldn't be, right? So there's still a lot of pros and cons within the esports space. But when I see women and non-binary folks on desk, when I see them putting themselves out there, even when you end up sometimes in these kinds of situations, even when these comments come in about like, what's this person doing on the desk? Tell her to go make a sandwich or whatever it is, right?
It's not even creative.
Or I know, right? I'm like, come up with a better one at the very least. Yeah. Like, that's not a challenge. You don't need to, just don't do them at all. Yeah. But when I see that, to even just the women that are participating, or, you know, non-gender conforming folks that are participating in the space, it makes me so happy because I know how much harder they've had to fight, how much doubt they've faced, how much of that they've had to filter, even just from my perspective, hosting on desk for many events. And so seeing them out there doing it and competing at high levels or putting themselves out there to face any level of scrutiny, it's really something that I just find to be really uplifting and empowering and wonderful and much needed in these spaces, because it's still an avenue of gaming in which we haven't seen as much progress.
I think that's so important to call out, right? And I'm glad that you're saying, like, look at these steps that we are taking where we're starting to see more people in the space, celebrating those individuals, welcoming them, highlighting them, doing more of that. One, gives them more support, right? Helps amplify the efforts that they're doing in, but it helps us to stay focused on who we're giving the narrative to, who we're paying attention to. It is important to acknowledge, and you're right, there's negativity. There's going to be those people who have some very dull-witted comments who are unsurprising and shows that it's impressive that they managed to find the keyboard to type those words, right? I don't feel like being kind to them. Sorry.
No, that's fair.
Oh, no. But more importantly, and I love this, that you spent so much more time and talking about, like, seeing them in these spots. Here are the events that we're doing it in, and that we're starting to see that progress, because that helps encourage more of that to happen. It encourages other people to then come in and chat and help support and to help amplify and build up that space, because it's just like with any good behavior, right? When one person does it, it breaks that mold to say more people are willing to do it as well. And I don't think people realize how important and how impactful it is to see one really nice comment in chat. We're really lucky here on Pink Pixels. Everyone's been really amazing. So thank you all. None of you all are terrible. But
Great job.
Yeah, great job. But when you stand out in that, that is so important to be able to create, because you're helping to turn this space into not just an absent of negative space, but purposely a positive space for others, right? Where they're already competitive, they're going to be facing challenges elsewhere, because you're right. It's not easy. And there's that additional challenge of sometimes when you are the only woman or non-binary that you have to win because you're representing an entire group for some reason now. You can't just be a player who's having fun and trying to be competitive, but now you are a token, right? Like, there's so much more behind it, or additional things like, we see this a lot for femme presenting casters, how you dress, how, if your pitch and your voice is too high, or if it's too low, right? We get critiqued on these things, and you don't often see it on that same level for more masculine presenting individuals, of like, they could come up in sometimes a t-shirt and no one will care, right? Like, they're not critiqued on that same level, and it can be very frustrating to see these made up standards and how they're evaluated. You just gotta
I mean,
yes.
Yes. You were really letting it sit, and I'm just over here like, yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Yes, we're gonna steep it in. We're gonna just soak it in for a second. I mean, you're right. In so many ways, there are a million standards that people who are not just what you expect from that space, masculine presenting oftentimes, get held to. And, I think one of the things that has been so inspiring in it, though, and that, man, I just encourage everybody, right? Whether you are a viewer, whether you are somebody involved in these events, whether you're a content creator, whatever it might be, right? Don't forget that even though oftentimes it feels like we are running our own game, and we oftentimes have to focus on that, that playing the game with everybody can be one of the most profound and incredible things you can do. Because honestly, getting into this space, I have found that the interactions that I've had with other folks that, maybe don't exactly fit that, have been so empowering and so uplifting. On one of my first casts for Blizzard, one of the other women that was on desk and was going to be doing a lot of stuff, who's been doing a lot of events with them for years, sent me a big document and was just like, hey, can I help you prep? And I was like, oh my gosh, like, thank you. Yeah, please. And she's like, I make all these notes myself. Like, it's not to say that I don't think that you'll prep, but like, do you want access to my notes? Do you want to see all the stuff that I already took down? And I was like, oh, thank you so much. Because like, I'm so so terrified. And I had like 3 spreadsheets already, but she put that
More.
out there. Yes, more, right?
Always.
When we were getting ready to go for this FanFest appearance that I mentioned, my co-caster Lithy is non-binary, and we had a discussion ahead of time where we were just like, hey, how do we want to dress? Right? What do we want to look like? And, I was just like, however you want to present, I will back you. I was like, I am there with you. I love you. Lithy's a good friend. And I was like, I will back you however. And Lithy was like, I think I'm going to wear this cute little number with like a skirt. And I was like, hell yeah. And I was like, I'm going to wear a suit.
Yes.
So we just came out like, what is gender? And we just went for it, And seeing some of the things that they've had to navigate, even as they've been doing work for Blizzard, it's been wild to me seeing how even some of those folks who were more accepting of me being on desk have had a lot to say about Lithy's cute sweater choices or whatever else, right?
Yes.
And so it's one of these things where we have to create connection and we have to uplift each other in spaces, because half of the gigs I even started to get were because other women that worked in esports were like, hey, I loved working with you, and I want to bring you on for more stuff. It was wild to me that for the appearance that I did with Final Fantasy XIV and Square Enix, I was the first female caster that they had ever had on desk. And they've been doing these events for something like 10 years now. And I mean, they have a variety of other hosts and things on stage, but when it came to the actual PvP casting and shoutcasting, and so it's something where
better late than never, I guess.
I know. Better late than never. Very glad that it happened.
Yes.
But it's a reminder again that like we can empower each other. And if you are somebody that's even just a viewer, right? When you see somebody on desk and you're like, hey, I love that you brought so-and-so on, leave it in the comments, put it in chat, retweet and be like, oh, I'm so excited to see the diversity of this desk in whatever way, shape or form, right? Because those are things that help empower. And I think even this podcast appearance, it was mentioned that somebody had messaged and said, I think Rook would be a really great guest. So it's one of those things where these little acts, even in a space where oftentimes we think like, oh, I shouldn't, or, I'll just stay in my corner. Those things make it possible for other people to break out of theirs. We don't have to be in corners, and we can take the stage together, and we can sit on desks at events, and we can cheer on players, and we can champion, diversity and all these other things in our games. And oftentimes, even behind the scenes, there's so much more that we can do for that, because I would not be where I am right now without those folks who have helped in so many ways, and so many more than I can even list, with their help, with their encouragement, with their feedback, with their reviewing of footage, with their, anything that they're doing to help out. And you try to pay it back yourself as well, so that somebody else who's like, I don't know if I belong in this space, goes, I do, and I can be in this space. Because then again, it becomes better for all of us when we have a variety of voices and a variety of people, and not just the same 3 people for however many years doing one thing and only providing like a really limited viewpoint,
Yes, you're right. Inviting more people into the space makes spaces better. And it's so important that we're part of that invitation, that we're saying, you know what? I know someone else who's going to be really good for this podcast. Let me make a recommendation here. After I finish a project, hey, if you're doing this again, I got somebody else that you might want to bring onto the table with us. Like there's more seats than we realize. And it's about vocalizing it, both for ourselves and for others. And I think sometimes it's easier to vocalize for others, right? Like, yes, of course, my friend. And instead of like hyping ourselves up, which we should all be better at, right? But it's a good place to begin, because when we're choosing to be quiet, or we say, you know what, I just don't know enough, we're really losing out opportunities. We're also forgetting that then these companies, these organizations may also not know enough to say like, oh, you know what, this person might actually be interested. If we ask them, they might say yes to this. And so speaking out those opportunities that you're interested in, the worst that they could say is no. I mean, that at the end of the day, and I'll be honest, I have gotten plenty of emails where people have said no, and that's okay. It hurts. I cry sometimes, but we move on, right? And then we send out the next email at the end of the day, because an email is not going to be the thing that kills me, right? I hope not. Put that on my tombstone.
I mean, that would be a wild plot twist if it was. But
it's probably more on the onslaught of emails that I get, you know, on a Monday morning. Oh, that's what kills me. But at the end of the day, putting yourself out there and just saying, hey, just so you know, I'm open to this opportunity. Here's my reel, or here's a piece about a slice of my podcast that I've put out there. Giving people information allows them to realize and consider you for something that maybe they hadn't considered for you before. That's so important to do, and I think is often overlooked. Goodness. For you, when you're talking to people, let's say they're wanting to get into this space. They see you, they're like, wow, she's a great caster. She's doing so many different things. She's going around. She's got this podcast. She's got a great streaming space. I want to be able to put myself out there in that same way. Let's start with a beginning step. What do you recommend for people to say, I got to start putting myself out there?
I think a big thing, and this goes for everything, from trying to join a raid group to trying to break into content creation. Yeah. The big first thing is to define what you want from it, what your goals are, right? If you are thinking to yourself, I don't know, I think it would be kind of fun, and I'd like to just toss up a stream and see if my friends hang out, that's a very different framework right from the get-go than I want to methodically build this into something that is adjacent to or might be a career, right?
Right.
So identifying first and foremost what you want from it is really important, because absolutely, please just go start streaming. You want to hang out with your friends, you want to show your stuff, like go for it. Make it a fun space that's just curated around that group and the hours that work for you and how that all goes. If you want to structure it into something that is bigger, you have to remember first and foremost that this space for 99.9% of creators is not going to be an overnight thing. I think it took me at least 2 years before I had any kind of consistent viewership, let alone even something like a payout from Twitch. You know what I mean? Like a regular payout. And particularly on Twitch as a platform, it is one that it can be very fickle. You really are only discoverable when you are live. But again, don't, as we talked about in the first half, taking care of yourself, don't be like, I'll just stream 24 hours a day then, because that will destroy you. Constant. And then you might die if you open an email. So don't do that.
Sleep streaming's a thing, right? Yes.
Yeah, totally. But, right, so the idea here is that you have to kind of pay attention to the medium and you have to set your expectations around small achievable goals, right? So you want to get up and running and you want to try to start building something. I personally think the basic building block of that is, yes, get all the software, that kind of stuff. You don't need the most impeccable setup ever. I still use an old C920 Logitech webcam. The big difference is lights. You can get cheap lights from Amazon. I usually do one on either angle here so that it gives you that coverage, and that'll make even the cheapest of cameras look 100% better. So again, it's not like you have to break the bank to get things set up. Work with what you have, see what you can improve with what you have, and then first and foremost, I oftentimes recommend set some kind of schedule. Now, make it a realistic one. This doesn't have to be I stream 5 days a week. It can be I stream 2 days a week on the nights that I know I'm going to have the most energy and time, and I will consistently do that. Now, there's no guarantee ever with streaming, right? It's kind of one of those things, and this goes for content creation as well on any platform, I think, even on YouTube, right? When are you going to release your video? What days are you going to set aside for your behind the scenes stuff? Are you going to work with an editor or not, right? So it's all the same thing. Pick some kind of schedule that realistically works for you. Don't try and like overshoot. It'd be like 5 nights a week, but I work a full-time job, so I'm going to cancel 70% of my streams. Right?
Yes.
And this is all within the mindset of wanting to build something like a consistent audience, which is a very different goal as well, right? So pick the days that you know you can realistically achieve and start doing them. And every person will have their own way that they want to tackle content creation. You might be a big interactive person, like I tend to be. You might be more focused on something like skill challenges. So your interactivity is a little bit lower, but what you're doing on the screen is more interesting, right? Get streaming and kind of see where that niche falls. I mean, I personally think that this is just an opinion. I think that if you're somebody that is a little bit more interactive, you may have a better chance of hooking some people in that at least want to conversationally still talk with you. But if you are somebody that is more like skills focused, proficiency focused, end game focused, or things like that, there are still ways to spin that, to communicate to the audience what challenges you're trying to tackle, what things you're trying to do, right? To kind of rally them behind some kind of concept of what you are achieving in the game. If you're a conversational person, you gotta just go all out. You gotta pretend like there's people in that chat.
Yep.
You gotta you just gotta be there, because so many times I'll see a smaller streamer that, I mean, I get it. We've been there if we've been on this platform.
Yep.
You'll see a smaller streamer who like clearly they've been doing this for ages and they're just sitting there, and you go in to click on their stream or something, or you drop a raid, but they're like not really expecting it, and they're just kind of like,
you're like, oh no, come back to life. Did we come too late? Are you dead? Yes.
Have we lost you? Like, and it's just like every opportunity with somebody is the chance to have someone come back again. Yeah. So that doesn't mean that you have to go completely over the top, but even just basic engagement. We talked earlier about eye contact, right? Talking like you're talking to someone on the other side of the camera. That sort of thing it can make a big difference in a small way, right? Where, you know, rather than just kind of quietly mumbling to yourself, you're engaging with someone and they might say, hey, you know what? I really liked that person that was playing this game the other day. And I think I'm going to go over there and see if they're doing something again, right?
Yes, their brain works like my brain. Those thoughts feel very similar.
Exactly. So from there, it's just small things, right? You're just trying to find something that gives you a good baseline. Listen to what people say. Do people really enjoy watching you play this one game and you like that game? Cool. See if you can build off of that. You have to experiment a bit at the start and just kind of see what's going to give you the most traction. But don't be afraid to try a game for more than just one stream. I did for a long time. I would sort of trial a game for anywhere from 2 to 3 months and kind of see, is there a community building around this? Was there an initial burst? Is there more of a longer sustain? Do people want to watch more of this? Is this actually bringing in viewers? Am I seeing more viewers from it? Consistent viewers? Can I build on it? So that's kind of how I started to select games. And then if I was going to introduce a new one, I'd do the same thing. I'd introduce it into the mix, usually like 1 day a week, and then I'd trial it for like 2 to 3 months. And then with all of this to be said, there's a lot of other things you can look at to build from there. I looked a lot at other streamers that were similar in my tone, community, and ideals, like we were talking about earlier, right? Those sort of base ideals that you might want to build a community around: fun, friendliness, openness, diversity, whatever it is that you might want to be fostering. Tryhards, sweaty boys, skill challenges, and game rating. That's also its own niche, right? But look for those kinds of things. See if you can find other creators that have similar ideals to that. Study them, see what they do, see how they structure their communities, take notes from that, think about that yourself. And then you might also, if you get to a certain point, start looking at when they schedule their streams. Because if you are somebody who shares a lot of similarity to them, it's likely that their audience has an interest in you. If you're both live at the same time, it's very possible that that audience is going to go with who they already know. If you're live before or after they are, it's very likely that they may either one day even raid into you. It's possible that, some of their audience might come out of that stream looking for somebody else. And so early in my building, I did a lot of stuff like that, taking notes from other people, other resources, picking tangible, discernible things that I could do for small improvements, whether that was overlay, whether that was some new interactive element, experimenting with those games. looking at similar creators that I could learn a lot from and that I could also schedule around to try to see if I could find those times that would work best for their audiences, either coming in or out. And I mean, just remember, I think it's a big blanket rule. Sorry, this is long, but it always feels like I want to try and give
People
as much
take
advice as I
notes.
can.
Fit it
So the other thing I would say is just remember that in this space or any space, you are representing yourself. And that I do think you need to have a very strong awareness of your own professionalism and the respect that you give to other creators and to professionals or to companies that you work with. I've seen even some of the biggest people in whatever community or in whatever programs or partner programs sometimes speak as though they are like on a Reddit, like a subreddit.
Yes. Like, oh, they said that?
Yeah, like two people that work at the companies, and sometimes they get away with it, but the vast majority of the time they get blacklisted from future events. And if you're really curious about breaking into things like more of the working with companies like I've done, with like Guild Wars 2 hosting their pre-show for one of their expansions, or doing things like this with Blizzard, or working with Final Fantasy 14, a huge part of that is respecting the etiquette protocol and understanding of those companies, their terms of service with their games, and in making sure that you're careful about how you curate and conduct yourself in this space. It's easy to get pulled into internet drama, but the best thing that I think you can do for your mental health and your well-being and everything else is to set good boundaries, take your responsibilities seriously, and particularly when it comes to working with companies, don't be afraid to pitch yourself to them, to put yourself out in front of them, put together the assets you need for that. Casting reels are a big one, and I took so long to make mine, but we finally got there.
Yes.
But like,
we'll take those victories.
Right? Do it. Put yourself out there. Approach respectfully. And if you are contacted for something, conduct yourself responsibly. Speak to them promptly, quickly, and thoroughly. This seems like a no-brainer, but if they message you documentation of something, or like notes on an event, or information about the teams, or anything, read it. The amount of times I've had people give me another gig because they're just like, you read the things we sent you, and I'm like,
that's the lowest bar.
No, I know, like nobody else did. What do you mean? How did they didn't, but they needed to know what the event was about. Did they not? So prep, consider, find a workflow that works for you, and demonstrate and show to companies that you pay attention to what they're doing, right? If they provide you information, and in that information, it says, we would like you to mention 3 times an hour this tagline, that is part of your job to deliver that. If you're under an NDA, that is part of your job to adhere to that. And if you have any questions or things like that, always contact them first. That has been one of the biggest assets just personally when it comes to actually working with and building relationships with companies for me, because if they give you a chance, which oftentimes can be hard to figure out how to even get or how to even approach,
right,
unless somebody speaks up for you, or you just happen to heckle the right person at the right time with a professional email.
No big deal.
No big deal. The big difference for a lot of them, and whether or not they will work with you or whether they want to continue working with you, is how you conduct yourself and the kind of reputation that you have representing yourself and the game in the space. It doesn't mean that you have to be like nothing but praises about the game all the time, but you need to be strategic, thoughtful, and tactful about how you are holding yourself in the space, and what you say about their game that they would want to invest in, or that they would want to have you continue putting out there. So honestly, it goes a long way to just take note, respond quickly, pay attention to what they're saying to you, demonstrate that you listened, and to continue to foster those relationships. But again, don't be afraid to actually reach out to them, because that's a lesson even this year I've been reminded of, that if you reach out far in advance of things, like you were saying, what's the worst that can happen? They say no. But if you don't reach out, you'll get missed for events. They'll never hear about you. You'll think that there's no way they couldn't have heard about you, but they won't.
How come? It's because they hire other groups that are not as immersed in your particular space on the internet, right? Like,
Yes.
there's a good reason. In all of this, I think you've pulled out such important things, right? One, know who you are, protect who you are, respect who you are, and then do that externally too. Respect your audience. Know who you want to connect with. Respect the clients, the sponsors you want to work with, both before you have them and also when you're working with them and afterwards, right? Like, it's an ongoing relationship that we have. All of these are things in thinking about being thoughtful and not just winging it. If you want to do this into a career and not just, which is perfectly fine. Some people want to be on the content creator. You turn it on and you're like, we're just going to do games. I'm going to just do art. I'm just going to do whatever it is. It doesn't matter. That's okay. Because you were right. Like, set your goals. Why are you doing this? What do you want out of it? And that will help guide you to help decide what is worth it. Don't put your name out for every event out there, because you don't want to do every event. There's gonna be I have never played Overwatch. Don't find me casting Overwatch at any point in time unless you want some really interesting commentary that would be very different. We'll say that, right? It'd be unique, but that's recognizing who you are and where you want to move into those spaces. Rook, you've given so much good advice. And also, you've given good perspective, whether people are a content creator or wherever they are in their life. It's thinking about the purposefulness in protecting who we are, having that grounding so that way we can then take that externally as we connect and we build good community, whether they're gamers or friends or whoever it happens to be in whatever space that we find ourselves. You are delight. We are just scratching the surface of who you are and what you've been doing, and it is not enough time. So for those wonderful, kind people, because everyone should, if you haven't already, make sure that you're following Rook. Where can they find you? What's your next thing? Help us stay involved so that way we can keep tabs, keep supporting you, and find out what your next gig is.
Thanks so much, Caustic. Yeah, if you would like to hang out sometime, you can find me on my own Twitch channel at twitch.tv Rookuri. That's Rookuri. You can also find my YouTube videos over on YouTube, which is the same. It's also Rookuri. And you can find me on Twitter/X, if I have to call it that, at Rookuri_ over there as well. There's a lot coming up. We have a ton of releases happening for Final Fantasy XIV, for Guild Wars 2, for Elden Ring. We've got so many launches. World of Warcraft has a new expansion this year too. So there will be a lot of things happening around those on my channels. We also have this upcoming weekend, depending on when you listen to this. It'll be, the weekend of June 8th and 9th. Yes. I will be on desk for Blizzard's WoW Cataclysm event that they're doing for Classic. So we're going to be watching 2 days of some really exciting sort of speed racing as groups level up and gear up as fast as they can, and then go blast through some raids to become dragon slayers. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And there will be a lot of other events coming up this summer as well, many of which I can't announce yet, but keep an eye out on social media and elsewhere, because if I'm not live on my own channel, I'm probably casting something, shoutcasting or hosting something. And if I'm not doing that, you can also catch me on 2 podcasts, one of which is the Lightbringers podcast for Guild Wars 2, and the other of which is Aetherite Radio for Final Fantasy XIV with Gamer Escape. So check it out. Come by sometime. Even if you're not a huge MMO player yourself, we still love to chat. We still love to catch up. And there's a good likelihood we've probably played at least some, if not many, of the games that you also enjoy. So we're not shy about talking about all the different titles that we love.
I love that. You have been a wonderful individual. Thank you for coming on and sharing who you are, your stories, your perspective. I know Chad is in love with you. I'm looking over here right now saying you're a wonderful personality. You've been awesome to listen to, right? So inspiring time and time again from all of these pieces. And we've only been here 2 hours, which is not enough. You are a dream individual. I hope many more opportunities keep knocking your way, because you are a person we want to see lifted in this space. Thank you for making our gaming community better. Thank you for coming by at Pink Pixels. Good friends, if you're here for the very first time, make sure that you share some love to our friend Rook. And on top of it, make sure you follow the Gamers channel. I'm not the only show that we have here. We have amazing other content creators throughout the week that play video games, have conversations. So make sure you give a follow below, whatever platform you find yourself being on. It's dealer's choice at this end. That's the benefit of Restream. So make sure that you give a follow. It's about finding spaces where you belong. That's the key thing. Video games are not solo adventures anymore. It's a space where you can connect and build, even if it is a solo game. Wherever you find yourself, find people that are going to help make you better and expand your experiences. We'll We'll see you all next week. Bye, everyone.